welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and when I say I'm delighted to be joined by JP Mason, I've got to say I really mean that, JP, because I'll only appear now on the ACSOM Bulletin once a week. That's the plan. So I get an opportunity to catch up with you once a week, but I get an opportunity to talk about Celtic once a week. And just before we came on air, I have to mention this. I'm sitting here in the studio this morning. We did a live show last night for the first time, JP, and I don't want to go on too much about music, but I'm going to have to mention it. Anyway, it's called the Oasis Album Club, and we're going to go through every Oasis album chronologically, including the solo stuff, and we're going to do a listening party. So it was me, Kevin and Russell last night in the studio.
I'm up for being here now, by the way. I'm up for being here now, big time.
Oh, brilliant, mate. Come into the studio, let's do it, because, you know, I just think it's one of the albums that gets a hard rap, and I might have a few comments to make. So I come in this morning and I'm a wee bit tired because we were in the studio to the back of 10 last night, and I'm getting old, mate. I can't do these late nights, but we will be talking to you in a wee minute or two about your late night at Halloween. And some good soul has sent ACSOM, the ACSOM team, 2 boxes of pies and Bovril for tonight's game. 2 boxes, you opened them up, there was like a big block of ice in each box, macaroni pies, so they obviously know I'm vegetarian, mincemeat pies, and loads of Bovril. How kind is that?
I mean, that's above and beyond. Let's hope they've not come from the other side and filled with anything, any sort of mystery meat. But no, that's
mystery
really
meat. JP, you know, I wouldn't even have checked that, right? But now I've got that story of Jimmy Five Bellies in Italy that Gascoigne told, and what was in his special mincemeat pie. So I will get them checked. But I'm on the macaroni ones anyway. And for anyone who cares to join us in ACSOM Studio for tonight's game, there are loads of pies. There's 2 boxes full of pies. So I put it out in the WhatsApp group, JP. I said, who wants to join us tonight? First up was Lawrence Conley. He's coming through in person because he likes a pie or 2. Anyway, that's what we're doing tonight. We're talking about late nights and how I'm too old for them, and I need to be in my kip for 11 o'clock at night. That wasn't you last week, and that was your Halloween night out before the game against Livingston. What was worse, the performance or your hangover?
I mean, they definitely match up against each other. It was a hellish hangover, I'm not going to lie. I went to, of all places, the garage on Sauchiehall Street, which is it's not my usual haunt, but I was out with some former work colleagues. We'd never had a night out together because we worked together through the pandemic in Tesco at St Rollox, of all places, which is what I did in my time throughout the pandemic, whilst I couldn't do my own job to save my sanity. So we had a night out, and copious amounts of drink were had. I was dressed as Patrick Bateman from American Psycho, which I thought would be lost on, well, not only the people that I was out with, but the rest of the clientele in the garage. But turns out I was wrong. So many people came up going, mate, costume's amazing, like quoting lines from the film and that. And I was like, how the hell? Like, I have no idea how people knew the film. I mean, I didn't realise it was that popular because it's a bit of a kind of cult classic, American Psycho.
It's got a cult following now, hasn't it, JP?
Yeah, it has. And I saw it when it came out in a wee cinema in Nice, in the south of France, called Rialto, which is kind of like a film house cameo affair, but in Nice. And I saw it came out, and I remember the scene where he kills Jared Leto with the axe, and a load of people got up and walked out in disgust. And I thought, well, I mean, the film's called American Psycho. It's hardly a Disney affair. Do you know what I mean? So I don't really know what they were expecting. But anyway, I was dressed as that. Lots of pints of Venom. I mean, it's not. So again, that's not my usual tipple. But I somehow got up and made it to the game on Saturday. Got a bus from where I stay in Maryhill, and I was glad that it actually bypassed the town because of this COP26 stuff. So it got out of town, went along Buchanan Street and then through Duke Street, and I must have shaved about half an hour, 40 minutes off my journey. So I actually made kickoff. Some people would say that's not a good thing, but Saturday. I mean, it's been talked about a lot this week, and it wasn't the best, was it? It was just yet another. I mean, we've drawn 0-0 with Livingston. We've drawn 0-0 with Livingston quite a few times at home, and you thought to yourself after Wednesday, I don't think anybody could be, lambasted for going in there with going into that game with a lot of optimism after Wednesday's game against Hibs. I thought, right, we're flying. Everybody's starting to really click, and then we just came up against a big solid black shirted wall of Livingston players, and we couldn't get by them, and it's just so frustrating. And then the penalty in the last minute. I mean, I didn't even see the hit on Furuhashi. Didn't see it. So I looked away, looked back, and then all of a sudden there's a red card in the air, and the players are assembling for a penalty, and then I thought, right, Juranovic, here we go, and then you see Giacomakis with the ball, and you're like, what's going on? But it's one of them. It's been and gone now. We have to focus on the next game, and that's tonight. Wish I was in Budapest, but I'm not that mental to go out to a foreign country at the moment in these circumstances, with no ticket and with no guarantee of getting into the game. I'm sure people will try and probably make it in, but to me it just doesn't seem like the right. I'm not having a pop at the people that have gone. Fair play to them. If you want to go gung ho and go somewhere like that, it's up to you. But to me, it just doesn't seem right at this moment in time to be going away in Europe. It's not that it doesn't feel right. It's just we've not got an allocation. We're not all together in the stadium. It doesn't feel like it normally does, when you go away and there's that kind of sense of camaraderie and everything else. So that's my opinion on that. But yeah, tonight's a big one.
It is a big one. I mean, Kevin McCluskey, for regular ACSOM viewers, Kevin is our Hungarian correspondent. He is originally from Stirling, but he lives over there with his wife and child. And he will be at the game tonight, and we hope to dial in, possibly pre-match and post-match, for a wee bit of in-stadium update from Kev. Kev wrote a fantastic blog, so check it out. Kevin McCluskey can be found on Twitter, Magyar Boy. Check it out because he speaks in some great detail with some authority about Ferencvaros and how they've been playing since we last met them as well, JP. So check it out. They've played 3 games domestically, a nothing each stalemate against MTK Budapest. Some Celtic fans will be aware of this, but we played them in the semi-final of the Cup Winners' Cup, 1964, JP, MTK. We beat them 3-0 at home. We went away from home. At this time, Jimmy McGrory was the manager of Celtic, and the team talk, which had been given by Sir Robert Kelly, who was just Rab Kelly back then, was that we had to go out and we had to attack, even though we had a 3-0 lead. And lo and behold, MTK beat us 4-0 to get through to the European Cup Winners' Cup final. That would have been our final in 1964-65. Bizarre. But they drew nothing each with them. They beat a team called Tokol in the Cup 7-0, but don't allow that to make you think that they're in free-scoring form. Apparently, the team are a lower division side from the equivalent of the Lowland League. And they've beaten Guillermo 2-0 in the league. So they're on not bad form at the moment. However, there is a section of the Ferencvaros fan base who are unhappy with the manager at this moment in time. Peter Stoger, the Austrian, who is struggling to win over the fans since the departure of Sergej Rebrov in the summer, because he was a bit of a fan's favourite and he'd done so well for them. So they are struggling a wee bit. It's maybe a good time to play them in that respect. But in terms of the Livingston game, and as you say, it's been spoken about all week, I won't labour it, but I will link it into tonight's game. I had watched the Hibs game like yourself and everybody else, and I was really enthused with the performance. I agreed with Ange Postecoglou. I felt it was the best half an hour of football I've seen under him, under his stewardship. And I think that probably skewed my view of the entire game. So I came away from the Hibs game thinking, we absolutely romped that. But now when I'm looking at the Hibs and the Livingston game collectively, I'm wondering if, we probably played similarly against Hibs after Rogic was taken off, as we did against Livy, in terms of not making as many chances, completely controlling the game, having the lion's share of possession, but not really finding the openings. And Rogic is that guy. He's the one who has that wizardry, JP, and I think we missed him immensely, which is quite worrying, because one player, maybe other than Callum McGregor, shouldn't have that big an impact on our game plan.
especially a player that was nearly leaving the club. He was almost surplus to requirements, and we talked about it last week. How a lot of people had kind of made their peace with the fact that he was going to go, and thanks for the memories and everything else. And now we're kind of hanging our hat on him as a first team player and as a guy that's going to win matches for us and things like that. So it shows up, and again, this has been spoken about. I know Kevin, the guys, talked about it yesterday. It shows up the kind of slightly threadbare nature of our squad, in that we don't have two players for every position. We've got midfielders, but we've all got different roles, and they can't all fulfil each other's roles or anything like that. So Beaton coming in, I mean, he was lambasted on various bulletins this week. I'll lambast him again. I thought he was poor on Saturday. I thought his distribution was pretty poor. His touch, his passing, not great. Just not incisive. And you really, really saw a huge difference between Saturday's midfield and Wednesday's midfield without Rogic. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the answer is. It definitely shows up where we need to strengthen in January. There's no two ways about it. We need somebody else. I mean, did Kev read out the stats about how many minutes Rogic has played this season already compared to last season? Mm-hmm. That is absolutely mental. I mean, he was stat-o boy yesterday, but I was quite impressed with it because he was coming out with all these mad stats that are showing up, the absolute difference in what players are being asked to contribute this season versus what they've been asked or expected to contribute in previous.
Kevin Graham has changed. I'm going to say that right now, JP. He's gone all stato on us. And in actual fact, he probably suits that role in the ACSOM team. If you think back to fantasy football that we used to watch with Skinner and Badil, the stato character sitting there with his cardigan on and his specs. Sorry, Kev, I know you're watching, mate. But yes, when Be Here Now comes along, JP, will make sure you're part of that, because I've got a lot to say about that album. A hell of a lot. We're talking about, and I'm probably going to jump forward a wee bit here. We're talking about the kind of midfield issue, and we'll be talking throughout the show as to how we're going to line up tonight. But it is a slight issue at this moment in time when a player like Rogic or McGregor or Kyogo or Starfelt, we'll talk about that, drop out. Then we really are scratching about to try and get a replacement in there. And I found it very interesting. Earlier on today, I'm watching a video with Victor Wanyama, who was speaking about how when he was at Spurs, Neil Lennon wanted to sign him for Celtic. Now, I loved Wanyama. I actually did. I thought he was absolutely brilliant at Celtic. I knew he was going to be one of these, the next in a long procession of Celtic players who were going to make that step up and go down south and make us a lot of money. I knew that. I remember the Firhill game. It was a friendly, and it was the return of Emilio Izaguirre after his leg break. And we went to Firhill. The Green Brigade turned up because there was nothing else happening that Saturday or Sunday. A total sellout it was. And Emilio comes back. Rasmussen was playing up front, but Wanyama had just signed. And I think it was maybe the day before he just arrived in Scotland. And he's just standing there at the dugout, 900 grand. I think we signed him from, was it Beerschot? Yeah. In Belgium. And you're thinking, we've seen so many players coming in for that kind of fee. But he was a revelation at Celtic. Now, when a player talks fondly of Celtic, he's in my good book straight away. But what he was saying is Celtic were the club that I would love to play for. Again and again, they're more than a club. I want to come back and give it a last go there. I love the club. I love the people. They're fans. Now, that's what he said. Neil Lennon obviously had experience of him, having signed him first time round. He was part of the team that beat Barcelona in 2012. Now, am I just romanticising it here? He's 30 years of age. Could he still do a job for Celtic?
I mean, well, we've just handed out a contract to James McCarthy, who's currently not doing a job for Celtic at the same age. So, I mean, do we want to flood the squad with players, who were not 100% sure that we were going to get, minutes out of them? I mean, not just minutes. I mean, full games. I mean, when we signed McCarthy, every single person surely was sceptical about what we were going to get from him. And I think if it was to sign Wanyama again, everybody obviously has fond memories. Nobody has fond memories of James McCarthy playing for Celtic because it's just the first time he's been here. But, people would be maybe expecting the Victor Wanyama of 8-9 years ago. And would they necessarily get that? I don't know. I've not seen enough of him in recent years. I mean, am I right in saying he's in the MLS at the moment?
Yeah, playing for Montreal just now.
Yeah.
He's played 50 games for them, JP, since signing in 2020. So he's played enough football over the last year. It's a decent level. You see a lot of it now. There's quite a bit of coverage on Sky Sports of the MLS. He is only 30. I mean, I say only 30 because we're now at a stage, we're now in a generation, JP, of a lot of these footballers having looked after themselves over their careers. They're extending their careers into their mid-30s and beyond. Obviously, James McCarthy's had some really bad injury issues, which will probably prevent him from doing it. But it does seem to be a troublesome position, that defensive midfielder. And that is exactly what Wanyama gives us. Some people may think that it is over-romanticising. Once you've been there, don't go back. Have we had a player coming back and being as effective second time round? I'm thinking Charlie Nicholas, Frank McAvenny, Izagirre.
That's the immediate people I go back to is folk like Charlie Nick and Frank McAvenny because, I was a wee guy when they came back and I remember being so excited that Frank McAvenny came back, but he came back at a time when we weren't great, I mean, it was a pretty brutal time to be a Celtic player and a Celtic fan at those times, where there was slim pickings and anything really. I mean, there was no trophies, there was precious few wins against Rangers. So it was,
is that McAvenny behind you?
It is, aye.
There he is. There's Mac right there. Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant.
I mean, when I was a wee guy, McAvenny was my hero. He used the Scottish Cup final 88. That's the first Celtic game I remember watching with my dad on the TV and just, being completely, enamoured by McAvenny. When he goes down and holds his hands when he scores and he realises what he's done, I mean, it's immortal. It's absolutely immortal in Celtic's history. And so when he came back, it was great. I wasn't there that night against Barcelona. I couldn't get a ticket. That was in my Celtic season ticket hiatus. I think I had 4 years out in the wilderness due to a holiday to Turkey, which was my choice of a holiday to Turkey or a season ticket. And so I wasn't there that night against Barcelona. I watched it in a pub in Leith. But I remember falling to the floor in a similar fashion to McAvenny when Wanyama scored. And obviously, again, when Tony Watt scored. And I watched it with a Rangers fan as well. So that was enjoyable.
But he also dropped his knees.
No, he just stood there shaking his head, and then called us jammy, and he was absolutely raging. But it was a nice moment. But yeah, Wanyama coming back, it's obviously nice to hear him say positive things about Celtic. It's always nice to hear that from former players if they genuinely mean it, and I think he does. I know he's just recently retired from international duty. I remember seeing the post about that. So he's obviously putting his concentration on his club football to help extend his playing career. With what sort of money he'd want, I mean, I guess you could point to Joe Hart. Joe Hart's come here. And Joe Hart will know him from Spurs, won't he?
And potentially Cameron Carter-Vickers, I would guess. Yeah. So we'll get a wee contingent there as Spurs players. I quite like the idea. I'm going to listen. If you say yes or no, there's going to be people disagree with me, and I totally get that. I don't think we've got a good record of bringing guys back and for them being successful second time round. I think Paddy Roberts is another example of that, isn't he? I mean, he came back. But Fraser Forster came back and he was good second time round, JP. But interestingly enough, it brought back this information that I was given a few months ago about the signing targets that we had for our tilt at 10 in a row. Obviously, Wanyama was one of them, but James McLean, Danny Drinkwater, Fraser Forster, Charlie Mulgrew and Robert Snodgrass were all on our wish list. Obviously, none of them signed, but I do think out of that list, I would have loved Foster to come back, and I would have taken Wanyama as well. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, indeed. Maybe now, this guy might be nothing, but
we'll see. He's put it out there.
Referring back to this conversation in 6 months' time or something, being like, remember we were talking about Wanyama and he's in a Celtic shirt again, but We'll see.
We shall see. You were talking about McAvennie dropping to his knees. I always remember when he scores the first goal, Paul McStay going up to him, and I did ask Frank when I had the pleasure of speaking to him, what did McStay say to you? And he says the conversation between the two of them was, let's go for the winner. So as soon as we equalised that day, they were going for the winner. And if you watch it, you can see the conversation taking place. Come on, get the ball, let's go back. We're going to win this game. So Paul McStay played that game. The year before that, by the way, I was going to say, imagine Nicholas and McAvennie at that stage, 87, 88.
Oh.
That would have been magnificent. Back in 87, Paul's big brother, Willie McStay, leaves the club. He had been there, strangely enough, although a few years older than Paul, he had made his debut after McStay. Such was the meteoric rise of Paul McStay as a teenager, making his debut as a 17-year-old. But Willie came into the studio yesterday, JP, which was an absolute pleasure, because for anybody who's spoken to Willie McStay, he is the nicest guy on the planet. And he's just Celtic through and through. And the reason he came through to the studio was he's doing the big sleep out on Saturday for the foundation. And he's going over to Sligo to do the Irish leg of the sleep out. And it all linked in because who signed Willie McStay for Celtic? It was Sean Fallon. Sean Fallon was from Sligo, as we all know. And the McStay household were actually preparing for a visit from Nottingham Forest, who were just about to come in and sign Willie McStay for Nottingham Forest, right? He was a highly rated player. He was the captain of the Scottish schoolboys team, and Nottingham Forest, who at that time were managed by Brian Clough, were going to sign Willie McStay. Half an hour beforehand, I don't know if they got the tip off, but Sean Fallon and Davy McParlin turns up at the McStay household. And of course, McStay, the name McStay is synonymous with Celtic at this stage because Willie's great uncles, also Willie and Jimmy, had both captained the club. In actual fact, Willie McStay, the first, handed the captain's armband to Jimmy McStay, who went on, his brother, who went on to manage the club. So Willie McStay becomes the third McStay to sign for Celtic. Sean Fallon signs him. He has a career not as successful as his wee brother, of course. He scores against Rangers. He wins the Scottish Cup in 85. He wins the league in 1986. So he has a good career, JP, you know, and then he goes down south. Anyway, he always wanted to be a manager. He was a bit like Davy Moyes in that respect. You know, very early on, gets his badges and he gets an opportunity, lo and behold, to go to Sligo. So he goes to Sligo Rovers. Before he goes, he phones his old compadre, Sean Fallon, who tells him, being a Sligonian, go over there, take your family, immerse yourself in Sligo, and you'll be a success. He goes over and wins the treble as the player-manager of Sligo Rovers. Whilst he's over in Sligo, he arranges for Celtic to come over for a friendly. So Paul McStay's playing for Celtic, Willie McStay's playing for Sligo Rovers, Pat Bonner's playing for Celtic, Pat Bonner's brother is playing for Sligo Rovers. We win 1-0. Rudy Vata scored. And so, can you remember it? Early 90s?
Somebody told me that was their first game that they ever saw. I know somebody that said that was their first game for Celtic. To
really?
Watch Celtic. Yeah, they were on a family holiday, and
brilliant.
I can't remember who it was. That's really annoying me, but I do remember it, and remember them telling me that it was just so bizarre that the Celtic team was like right there. I mean, it wasn't as if it was like a San Siro or anything like that. Yeah. You know, that it was a pretty small park, and
probably where stand JP, and then just like standing behind barriers all the way around the other three.
That's going to. I'll if anybody's watching that that knows that story, then I'm sure I'll get a text or something like that. But I have to hold my hands up and say I can't remember who it was that told me that, but it's definitely in my head because as soon as you said Sligo friendly with Celtic, I was like that I know somebody that was at that game. So
it's incredible. There's a great picture actually on the Celtic wiki, and you've got all the Sligo team and all the Celtic team together. So Willie McStay was a huge success over there. At the final, I think they played Derry City in the Irish Cup final. At that game was none other than Willie's ex-teammate Tommy Burns. Tommy had just taken over at Celtic 1994, and he asks Willie McStay to come back to Celtic to get involved in the youth development at the club at that time. It needed a complete overhaul. Tommy Burns was a visionary in that respect, as you know, from Lennoxtown, etc., which should be renamed the Tommy Burns Training Complex or Centre. I think everybody will agree. Yeah. So Willie McStay comes back from being a very successful player-manager over in Sligo Rovers. He comes back because the allure of Celtic and Tommy Burns is too strong. And lo and behold, there's been a couple of wee moments where he's went and managed on his own terms with the likes of Ross County, Ujpest Dosa, interestingly enough, Hungarian side, and we'll be in Hungary tonight. But he's been at Celtic ever since. He turned 60 this month, and he's had a football career since the age of 15. As I say, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. But the reason I mention it, JP, is Celtic's obviously synonymous with charity, built on charitable kind of reasons and foundations. Brother Wilfred, real name Andrew Kieran's, also from Sligo, all fits in. Wilfred's Wish, etc. And the foundation are doing a big sleep out this Saturday. So we interviewed Willie. The video will go out on Friday night on the ACSOM channel on YouTube. And we'll have all the links underneath. So if you want to give a donation, however small, to Willie's quest to raise some funds for the foundation, all the information will be on the video as well. And what's happened is his wife has gone toe-to-toe, head-to-head, and she's also going to do it. And they're actually competing to see who can get the most money for charity, JP. So look out for that video on Friday night.
I did meet him, actually. I went on an impromptu, unofficial scouting mission to watch Lewis Morgan play for St Mirren against Dumbarton. Remember, we'd signed him, and then he continued to play for St Mirren.
Aye.
I went on a Tuesday night or something like that. I just thought, you know what, I'm going to go along and watch this guy, see what he's like in the flesh. I just went along myself, and I ended up sitting next to Willie McStay and his son, and we were like chatting about Lewis Morgan and Celtic and all that sort of stuff. So I have met him. He is a really nice guy. And
nice,
I would never have thought he was 60, to be honest. He's looking good for 60, that's for sure.
He definitely is, and he's making me feel guilty before I've even eaten tonight's pies, because he is looking very fit for his age. But I'm still going to have a few macaroni pies. But one last word on this before we move to the Ferencvaros game is because we do tend to go on a wee tangents, JP, on a Thursday.
Mostly about Celtic today, though, to be fair.
It is. But by the way, we're only halfway through, so watch this space. So Willie McStay was signed by Sean Fallon. Sean Fallon is your link back to the great 1950s sides that beat Rangers 7-1, won the double in 53, 54, etc. And he's also the link to, obviously, Jock Stein, Neely Mock and Willie Fernie, that great backroom team who conquered Europe. So Willie McStay then, after his playing career finishes, becomes one of these guys who's involved in the youth development at Celtic and recruitment. And so many players have gone through the system under the watchful eye and tutelage of Willie McStay. I mean, there's a whole plethora of them. If you think back over the last 20, 30 years, Willie's been there or thereabouts. But there's a great image of John Kennedy and Steve McManus both signing on the same day. You might have seen this. And again, I think it's on the Celtic Wiki. And Willie McStay is in the picture. I think Tommy Burns is in the picture, and both sets of parents. And they're signing on the same day, JP, right? And Willie was obviously involved in that amongst many other players. And those two guys are now in the Celtic dugout. They're going to be in the Celtic dugout tonight. And I just think that procession, that life's blood going from Sean Fallon right up to the present day is so important for a club like Celtic, because it's all about tradition. It's all about knowing what the club's all about. It's not just about, being a footballer and this is your job. You need to know the fabric of the club, JP. And I think that's really important with a club like Celtic. And that's why figures like Willie McStay, although never the highest profile guy, never putting himself out there, it's so important to have people like that at the club.
Yeah, just people to put their arm around new players and sort of hammer home what they're playing for and who they're playing for. Because if you lose that, then your club becomes sanitised. And that's the thing that would always make me fearful of, any of these sort of takeover. I know that we nearly touched upon it, I think, at the end of last week or maybe the week before when we were talking about Red Bull, the Red Bull rumour, or somebody put a comment up and said Red Bull rumour or something like that, question mark. If that was ever to happen to Celtic, and I have to say, God forbid that it would, people might argue, oh yeah, we'd have this huge influx of money and everything else, but I don't know if it would. I think it would maybe change the fabric of the club, because the club wouldn't really be the same anymore, and maybe they wouldn't retain people like, Stephen McManus, Willie McStay, John Kennedy. As much as people have been critical of John Kennedy's been there at Celtic since he was a wee guy, and like you say, knows the fabric of the club. He might be associated with last season's horror show, but some of the players are still there, and they're associated with last season's horror show. So I think clean slates were to be given on that front, provided, as I said many times, provided that he was officially wanted by Ange Postecoglou. But yeah, you're right. Having people at the club that know the traditions and just know the types of things to say to players to get the best out of them. Like they can identify what type of a character a player is probably within 5-10 minutes of them being at the club, and then knowing what buttons to press and what buttons not to press. So these guys, if they get a better tune out of a Cameron Carter-Vickers or a Philip Jota, then they're worth their weight in gold being there, and they're worth their not just as a coach, just as a person as well. And by all accounts, well, I've met Stephen McManus once briefly, and I've met Willie McStay. I've not met John Kennedy, but by all accounts, everybody I speak to all say they're really good people. So you want good people at your club.
You do, and you want people to understand the club, the magnitude of what it means to represent Celtic. I'm not coming across all like traditionalist here. I truly believe this. It's not romanticism, JP. I watched that video of John Clark that I think he did when we had New Balance as a kit supplier. And, it's almost like a tearjerker when he's talking and he's giving it all this. It's just unbelievable. And when you hear the way that Henrik Larsson speaks about John Clark, the fact that a Lisbon Lions prepares the kit, that is important. That really is important.
No, I know some things about that, and Henrik Larsson really does love John Clark, and I'm not really breaking any rules by saying this, but they meet up, for a cup of tea and a cake in a random Glasgow hotel lobby. Whenever Henrik Larsson's in town, they meet up, and I think that's amazing. Just to think that they've got that sort of relationship, that it's not for the cameras, it's not for it's just for them, and just to have a catch up and talk football, and it's amazing. And that stretches back to John Clark being there for Henrik Larsson, probably in his darkest time as a football player when he was out injured, which was right at this moment in time, like 22 years ago. I mean, it was because today's the anniversary of the home game against Lyon in the UEFA Cup. We got beat 1-0, and I think it was Jerome Varai that scored.
Did you post the programme on your Twitter page?
Yeah, I looked up who scored and who was the team, and Burchell started for Celtic that night, which is incredible considering he was only a year or so into his senior career. But Larsson had broke his leg. I'd been at the away game that night when it happened, and I mean, I'm sure he was a relatively young guy then, what would he have been, 20, 27, 28, something like that. I'm sure John Clark helped him a lot through that time, and that's when you look to these guys for help for moments when things aren't going that well, whether it's injury or personal stuff or whatever. So it's great when there's people like that at the club.
Definitely, and long may it continue. One final thing that Willie did speak about was during the 1985 European run, following the Rapid Vienna fiasco, JP, Celtic were forced to play behind closed doors the following season, and that was in October 1985 against Atletico Madrid. We lost the game 2-1, having drawn nothing each in Spain. Roy Aitken scoring for Celtic, but we played in front of no fans. So I was speaking to Willie about the impact of that. Obviously, the performance away was fine, but playing at an empty Celtic Park seemed to spook the players. Murdo McLeod missed a very good chance in 6 minutes. And then obviously last season during the lockdown, playing in front of no fans. And he spoke about how it has a massive effect. And obviously that's relevant tonight because there won't be any Celtic fans in the stadium. Do you think that'll play a big part this evening?
Well, I mean, a lot of them are used to playing in front of no fans, which is unfortunate because it's the last thing you want people to get used to, playing football in front of no fans. But now that they've got used to the support again that they're getting, at away grounds in Scotland, and we haven't had an away support at any of the European. Well, we've only played Alkmaar and Betis. I don't think we've had an allocation at those games, as far as I know. I might be wrong. I didn't even attempt to try and go to either of those games. I'm not going to attempt to go to Leverkusen as well, because I know even if we do get an allocation in Leverkusen, it'll be minimal. It'll be the same as what they got at Celtic Park, I would imagine, just to keep it, quid pro quo. So trying to get a ticket for that would be absolutely impossible, which is a shame because I just love going away in Europe. It's something I've got used to doing. I was in Copenhagen last year, the last one that we were at before all this chaos, and I think the support in the stadium, can't be underestimated, especially away from home. Like, I've not heard too many players talk about it, but there can't be anything more satisfying than scoring a goal in an away opposition stadium and then running over to the away fans who've travelled hundreds of miles, have joined up cities to get to other cities, and some of the stories that people go to, the lengths and breadths that people go to get to these cities are remarkable. Like, I mean, Michael, my friend, booked us and we flew home via Athens from Munich. I mean, that was just crazy. I mean, his logic was that it meant that we didn't need to spend a whole day in Heathrow Airport, so we spent about half a day in Athens, and we were up in the Necropolis in the Celtic tops on the way home from Bayern Munich. It's totally mental. Like, I never thought I would ever be in Munich, Athens, London, and then Edinburgh in the same day, but there you are. It can happen. Dreams can come true. But yeah, I wish everything was normal. I wish we had an allocation. I probably wouldn't be sitting here speaking to you right now if we did. I'd never been to Budapest, so I've always wanted to go. I always love going to different places. That's the beauty of supporting Celtic and getting to go to these places that you've never been to before, because I've been to loads of places as a result of Celtic, and it's broadened my horizons. It's broadened my sort of travel history and culture, and given me an opportunity to go to these places. And yeah, so I really hope that I hope they just play their game and do what we know they can do. Ferencvaros will have to come out. They're not going to be like Livingston tonight.
No,
we know that. It's
It's win or bust for them tonight, isn't it?
It's win or bust for them. So they have to come at us, and you'd like to think that we have the artillery to do some damage, especially if I'd like to see James Forrest start. He's had a couple of run-outs now, and he seems to have come through that okay. The manager said that he seems to be okay. So, I mean, he's been one of... I mean, you heard the reception he got when he came back at Celtic Park. The whole stadium, despite there being this kind of like... There's always been a bit of, what's the word? There is a
apathy.
word. Sorry? Apathy. Yeah. There's always been a bit kind of like just taking James Forrest for granted, despite his numbers and his goals and his assists and everything else. And I think we missed it so badly, last season, and certainly we've missed it this season as well. He would have been a really good player to have at Ange Postecoglou's disposal to be a starter at the start of this season to help the transition. And meanwhile, he's been kicking his heels in the stand. Same with Julian as well. I mean, it's quite mad that Forrest has overseen this huge change, but from a distance, from a periphery, he's not actually been able to be involved until now. So I would love to see him unleashed tonight. And James Forrest has done the business away from home in Europe before, quite a few times as well. Lazio, people always go on about Ncham's goal, but James Forrest got the first goal.
Yeah, it's a wee bit like Tony Watt's goal against Barcelona. We were talking about Wanyama earlier. His goal was fantastic.
It
Charlie
was.
McGrew cross, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, he's a significant player, and yeah, I'd hope that he comes in tonight and shows everybody what we've been missing. The midfield's a tricky one. It's a bit of a bag of frogs. The midfield, I don't really know who goes where. We'll have to wait and see. It will be an interesting interesting one that I don't think is going to be any surprises. I think it probably will be Beaton. I think Welsh will probably come in at centre half. Just from the wee bits that he said about the team yesterday in the press conference, I think, it would be a little bit harsh on Welsh if he didn't get an opportunity in this situation where he's been fit and ready to play as a centre half. He's played quite a number of games for Celtic, and we've now got an injury to a £4.5 million signing. Well, why wouldn't you play Stephen Welsh? And why would you resort to playing near Beaton? He's surely going to probably need near Beaton in the midfield. So
yeah. This is one of the big dilemmas, I think. I'm going to pull in some of the comments coming in. Urban Coolsey, who joins us on a regular basis, and it's always great to see. He just finished his shift, roaring fire on the couch, laptop at the ready. Love it. Are you having some macaroni pies and Bovril for the game, though? That's the question, because that would top that off nicely. So welcome everybody who's getting involved in the comment section. Aldo, sorry, were we late today? JP? Maybe a few seconds. Alan Robertson, afternoon, guys and girls. It's great to get everybody's views on this. We will be talking about the team because there's a few dilemmas in there. Patrick Murphy would line up as follows: Hart, Ralston, Cameron Carter, Vickers, Welsh, Juranovic, McGregor and Turnbull, Forrest, Jota, Hugo of Giakoumakis. Now, giving Giakoumakis a chance to redeem himself. We'll run through the team in some detail. So, first and foremost, the goalie picks himself. I mean, Joe Hart, I think the big question for me is he pound for pound, is he the best signing of the summer?
I mean, you have to say yeah, because it was such a problem area for us, and one that everybody was kind of scrambling about, thinking, who are we going to get? Everybody was pining for Forster. Nobody's got any faith in Vasilis Barkas. Scott Bain is, probably not considered by many to be worthy of being a Celtic number one. Decent backup, yes, but not. I mean, I don't think anybody would have ever expected when we signed Scott Bain that he was going to end up being the number one at Celtic. I don't think even he would have thought that, to be honest. So Joe Hart coming in has been, he's been solid. He's done what a goalkeeper should do, and is keep the ball at the back of the net. Yes, there's been a couple of moments where he's maybe not looked as clever, but I think just everything that he's brought to the club. There's so many people you see have changed their opinion of him, and self included. I honestly didn't have a lot of time for him as a person. I knew he was a good keeper. And I knew, despite the way career's gone in the last few years, that he would still be a good keeper for us. But I just didn't know if I really liked him as a guy. But he's shattered all of that, and absolutely love to see someone enjoying their football as much purely for a football reason, and not for the glamour or anything else. He's just become entrenched in Celtic, and long may that continue. So he's straight in there, and I think he's helped the defence as well. There's no two ways about it. Having somebody that can shout at the back and lead from the back is surely massive for a new defence and a new unit.
The big thing as well, obviously, as well as hopeful that he's still in touch with Wanyama and he can. Create a passage back to Celtic Park. You're looking at the fact that I was concerned at the amount of times that Joe Hart was put under pressure because we continually played around at the back. I don't mind playing out from the back, JP. I totally get that. I love watching entertaining football. But the amount of times we continually played it about at the back, which wasn't making any progress whatsoever, and it generally meant that Joe Hart was put under a lot of pressure. I don't like seeing him having to do wee back heels and wee shimmies and take players on and all that. But there's a couple of things I noticed, and I noticed them against Livingston as well. On two occasions, he valiantly tried to turn one of the very few Livingston attacks into a Celtic attack once it broke down. He's trained the ball boys to get the ball to him, like rapid, so that he can take a by kick and get the ball up the park when necessary.
That's filtered around the rest of the team as well. And I mentioned that to somebody on Saturday. I was like, look how quickly the ball boys are ready to give the ball back. And it seems to have all stemmed from Hart being that guy. It was like Ralston came over to take a shy just in front of me, and the ball was in his hand almost immediately as the ball had gone out of play, So I think that's that's potentially filtered around it. Because thinking back, it did seem to always be a bit laboured, how long that seemed to take. But now it's just like bang, back on the park and off we go.
It's bizarre. When you look back, you've got McAvenny over your right shoulder. It's bizarre if you look back to that era where, goalkeepers took an age. They waited until everybody was back in position, then they took the bye kick.
Yeah.
About the only opportunity we could kind of craft against Livingston was the defence to attack transition, which obviously there weren't that many opportunities for that. The other thing that I noticed was him coming out almost to the halfway line to prevent the ball from going out for a throw-in, just to keep the possession as well. Because the minute you get a throw-in, you're under pressure. I mean, the amount of times you lose possession from your own throw-in, because obviously with Livingston, they're very resolute in defence. Basically, they're just going to find a Celtic jersey and then you're up against it to try and find a gap in a space. So I think 100% Joe Hart for me is a leader. I know that officially James Forrest is the vice captain, but I would never have an issue with Joe Hart taking that captain's armband in the absence of Callum McGregor. The right back, we need to talk about Tony Ralston. He's just been given a new deal, well deserved. Again, speaking to Willie McStay, he was talking about the character of this young man, because he is still a young man. He's now played 41 games for Celtic, scoring 6 goals and having 4 assists. And he deserves that new contract. Does he deserve a Scotland call-up, though?
Well, I mean, did you see the stat that somebody put up? It was Ralston versus Nathan Patterson and Stephen McDonnell. And
it was E-Seltz or Seltzer here, I think, put it up. I did see that, yep.
Their appearances and returns versus his. And it's almost just like, he's not fashionable enough or something like that, or he's considered too rugged or raw or not crafted or whatever. I mean, that's absolute nonsense. He should 100% be in there. He's playing first team football for Celtic, and why on earth is he not being considered? It's quite snobbish. It's basically like us as Celtic fans, digging our heels in and going, oh, well, we don't think he should get a new contract. If anybody thinks that he shouldn't get a contract based on his contribution and his efforts, then you're being as blind to the what we're seeing in front of us as the Scotland manager is. Or it's really unfair, I think. I mean, I'm sure it probably doesn't bother him. I mean, he's just got a deal that will probably set him up for life. I mean, I think he was as surprised as any of us when he got the 1-year deal, because I think he probably thought he was out the door. Especially after a pretty unsuccessful loan spells elsewhere. I mean, none of us thought this was coming. Nobody could have predicted that Anthony Ralston would become this kind of almost loved character. I mean, I see a lot of stuff online where, people are, I mean, Dominic Diamond is obsessed with the guy. I don't know if you've seen Dominic Diamond is his number one fan, and not in a mocking way or an ironic way. He genuinely, is. Some of his patter about Ralston is pretty funny, because he's so passionate about him doing well. So I'm happy. I said this before on here. I love nothing more than every player to be Scottish and Celtic fans, and he's Scottish and he's a Celtic fan. Yes, he's probably not going to be the right back first choice going forward, but I mean, he was nowhere near even being in the squad beforehand, and was wrongly bumped out of the team, I think, after that Livingston game that you pointed out he was the best player in the park, and then he's disappeared, and it was a bit unfair really, because he did play well that night, and that was probably the sort of the beginnings of what we're seeing now. And now he's working with a manager who trusts him and will put him in big games, and he hasn't really let us down, to be honest. I can't really recall. I'm not. Sort of, what's the word when you recalibrate, or not recalibrate, when you, I don't know, when you try and change the narrative of history. I'm not doing that here. He hasn't, as far as I can remember, he hasn't let us down. He's not lost his head and got sent off. He's not, given away any terrible, goals or anything like that. He's been solid.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, he's in there tonight, and I'm sure he'll be full of confidence after being shown confidence by the club and the manager with the new contract.
Aye, I mean, in Europe, alone, he's scored in Europe this season. He's had 2 absolute saving tackles, where it was a certain goal had it not been for the anticipation of Tony Ralston almost playing like a sweeper to get back and cover the lines. There are always unfashionable players at Celtic and probably at most clubs. I think he'll always fall into that category. But the one thing I think that has changed in the modern game, people going about a prerequisite being 100% and being committed in your application. I don't think that exists. Yes, it should be a prerequisite. It should be a given, but I don't think it exists. And I think you only need to look at last season to realise that players maybe don't down tools as much unless your name's Olivia and Cham, but they certainly don't put in 100% effort. You just need to look, for anybody who watches English football, you just need to watch Crystal Palace and the application of Odsonne-Edouard for that Palace side compared to his performances last season in a Celtic jersey. And that's a player that I held up here in terms of his talent. Everybody in their own mind, JP, has got their greatest Celtic 11 that they've seen in the flesh. And it's hard for anybody to get into that. They need to be a very special player to get in. Which midfielder's going to push Paul McStay out of my team? Nobody. But in recent years, we've had people like Van Dijk in my greatest 11, and that isn't because of what he's done since he's left Celtic. I just remember him being an absolute joy to watch.
He's head and shoulders above everybody.
He was unbelievable. He just, the finesse of that player. Edouard wasn't in my team, but he was getting there. He was that talented, but his application last season left a lot to be desired. So I think when you're talking about Ralston and the dedication and the commitment, it's not a given. It is a quality in a player nowadays. And I think fully deserved. And the time will come. He will get a cap for Scotland, I'm pretty sure. But what it does mean is the right back who we signed to be a first choice at the moment, anyway, is playing left back. And I think, he should be playing left back in relation to the fact that he's probably the best left back that we've got at the moment, who's fit, even though his natural position is a right back. Big question for me would be, after what happened at the weekend, does Juranovic go back on the penalties? What would that do if, indeed, Giakoumakis is on the park? If Juranovic gets the penalties, or that's a dilemma. Do they go back to Giakoumakis to try and give him a wee bit of confidence? Let's go over this. Does it depend on the stage of the game? If it's nothing each with a minute to go, who gets the penalty?
Do you know what? See, thinking about that penalty, and by the way, on penalties, I do need to address something from last week, and I'll do it very quickly just now before we talk about Giakoumakis. Is when we were talking last week about the Rangers penalty that was given against Aberdeen, Bates. Remember I said, and I've specifically said, if Bates has done something, then I'll hold my hands up and say, right, okay. So you put the post up on Twitter, and a Rangers fan, as they're wont to do, watched this last week and immediately put a screenshot and put awkward with an emoji and then a picture where you can see the shirt being pulled. Now, it's clear as day. The shirt was pulled. Sakala absolutely made the most of it, because there's no way that shirt pull caused Sakala to go down in that fashion. He completely and utterly bought the penalty. And Bates's lack of reaction shows that, I've pulled his shirt. I've got no complaints. Mm-hmm. But there's no way you can tell me that caused Sakala to go down. He's just been cute, and he's won the penalty. And by the letter of the law, he's pulled his shirt. How Beaton has seen that, I do not know. But because I watched it, as I said last week, I watched it about 10 times before we came on here, and I couldn't see that shirt pull. But obviously, if you slow it down and screenshot it, then you can see the shirt getting pulled back. So there you go, Rory, whatever your name is. Hope you're watching this week. You said that we spoke about Rangers for an hour, but you only watched 10 minutes. So let's see how much you're watching this week. I've held my hands up. I said what I said last week. I'm saying what I said this week. So there you go. Bang. Off you go. The Celtic penalty taking thing. You remember Dembele got given a penalty in a Champions League qualifier, Mr. Dembele. Was that in the last minute? Or was it? It
was. Yeah, absolutely. Because I wasn't at the game because I was in London. Mm-hmm. So I remember that particularly well because I was somewhere else, and I couldn't be at the game. But yeah, absolutely, last minute.
That kind of made Dembele. That people were all, there was question marks over Dembele up until that point, and I remember that very significantly, that he scored that, put away that penalty, and that gave him the sort of G up maybe that he needed at that point as a young new Celtic striker, and that could have been what happened with Giakoumakis on Saturday. For whatever reason, whether it was pressure or not, I don't know, but his penalty was woeful. Astana, there you go. Cheers, Kev. Stato. That penalty could have given him that G up, and maybe that was the thinking in not changing it, because a lot of people have said, the order should have come from the manager to say, right, oh no, I know we said Giakoumakis would be the penalty taker, but give it to Juranovic because it's the last minute. We're 0-0. This is an important, a really important moment. And, there's an alternate universe, Kev Graham likes them, where Juranovic has taken that penalty and scored. I've no doubt about it at all. It is a tricky one now. How do you go back? How do you revert back? How do you pull it away? Because you don't want to destroy Giakoumakis' confidence, because I think before Saturday, I think everybody was starting to think, wow, this guy looks all right. He'd come on against Ferencvaros, was it Ferencvaros in the last? Yeah, it was Ferencvaros.
Yeah, at home.
He looked strong in that game and looked like he was prepared to show what he could give the club. So I don't know. If it was me, I would definitely say, and it should have been Juranovic anyway, because I would have always said it's a player's place to take the penalties until they miss one, because that seemed to be how things have gone in the past. So I would have thought for the time being, because he's on the park, Juranovic is playing. Giakoumakis hasn't been playing every single game, so I think Colin alluded to this. Why would you not, have your number one penalty taker who's going to be on the park all the time to take the penalties? So yeah, but I'm happy with Juranovic at left back, and certainly Cameron Carter-Vickers and Welsh as the centre half as well. That's
a big one, because he did mention Welsh. He called him Welsh and he called Beaton Nero. So I don't know if that's his new nickname, Nero Beaton. But I was of the view that we have seen Welsh dropped twice this season. He was dropped after the Livy game. He was dropped for the Hearts game at the beginning of the season. And I felt, I know he's not perfect. I know he's made a few mistakes, JP, but I do look at Welsh as being a first-team player, like Ralston, who I think will be in and around the squad for the next 3, 4, 5 years. But I'm not sure if Ange is 100% convinced with him, and I think he's going to play safe and potentially play Beaton at centre-half tonight. And then I asked, by the way, I'd play Welsh every day of the week, but then I look at Liam Scales and I wonder why he's so out of favour. I'm not saying for a moment throw him in there, because there's no way I'd be throwing in a player who's had fleeting appearances in a big European game away from home. But he is a natural left-sided centre-half. And if he had more games under his belt, perhaps he would have been an option. Is it a concern that he's not really been given the nod by Ange?
I would say so, yeah. I don't know what's stopping him getting the game time. Whether it's at left back or left centre back or whatever, it just seems a little bit odd, because he's come in with good pedigree, and he's come in with a good number of games under his belt as well, and he has looked good when he's come on in the brief moments that we've seen him. You'd think he would have got a start by now. We're in November. I know it's been pretty hectic in terms of the fixtures and everything else, but we've got to be able to see what this guy can give, and I think the manager has to be able to see what he can give as well, and see how he stands up in a game, against any opponent, never mind whether it's Europe or Scotland or whatever, because you need to have an idea. I mean, he's given Giakoumakis a game. He was sort of on the fringes for a while, so I don't know. I'm like you. It certainly won't happen tonight, but I would like to think that Welsh would be given the chance tonight, because he's not. I don't think really Welsh has let us down. Was he at fault for the Livingston goal? possibly, but I mean, I don't think that's quite harsh to hold that against them. You know, the rest of the team didn't perform that day as they should. So to sort of hang him out to dry for that's a bit harsh. So I guess it's intriguing to see what's going to happen, because it does seem a little bit up in the air at the moment in terms of what we're going to see tonight.
Yeah. And the decision of whether or not to play Welsh will have a knock-on effect in the midfield. So, for example, if Beaton plays centre half, then you're asking the question about McCarthy playing the number 6.
I don't think there's any way he's playing tonight. Surely not.
Well, what I would certainly do is, for me, McGregor plays midfield, but in a more advanced area. You play your holding midfielder, be that near Beaton, James McCarthy. It's not going to be Sorrow because he's another one who's fallen out of favour. But I would play Turnbull in Roderick's role. I would play Kyogo through the middle. I'm not dropping Giakoumakis. It's just squad rotation. And like yourself, I definitely would play Forrest on the right. I think Abada's gone off the boil a wee bit. And then on the left, he ought to pick himself. But it is good to have those options, JP, down the left and the right. We didn't have that for a long time. You've now got Mikey Johnson, Abada, Forrest and Jota.
By the way, I know it doesn't really matter or anything at all, but did you see Jota's the way he brought the ball down on Saturday?
Oh, it was just supreme.
Somebody around about me said that's up there with Lubo, controlling it on his rear end. And I was at that game. I remember it very, very well. Jota even stopped to take the applause.
He took a moment, didn't he?
He took a moment to be like, "What about that?" And I love that in a player. You know, that it's few and far between now and these days. You know, it's you don't really see that kind of. It wasn't showboating really. It was just skill. You know, I don't think he wasn't taking the mick. He didn't stand on the ball and give a salute or anything like that. I mean, that really is taking the mick. But if you remember who did that.
Yeah, I do. He was Brian McClure's roommate for a spell. That player that you're talking about.
Oh, of course. Yeah, at United. Yeah. Aye. That's pretty cool. But no, I do like Jota a lot, and I think he is fast. I mean, if everybody was delighted with Ralston signing a new contract, which they, seem to be, Jota. If Jota puts pen to paper on a deal, I think that will even eclipse the reaction you saw for Ralston. I'm sure Celtic social media could have a lot of fun in the build up to that. I saw that they had this sort of brick wall with the eyes peeking out for the Ralston signing. So yeah, they could definitely have a lot of fun with that. I'm thinking Faith, George Michael, Wham, all sorts of stuff. We'll wait and see.
Absolutely. But you brought them up. You brought George Michael up. So I'm going to mention the fact that last night we did the first of a new show on the channel. It's called the Oasis Album Club. What's that got to do with Wham? Well, one of the questions is, if you could drop one of the songs, JP, for one of the B-sides, what would it be and why? My decision was to drop Married with Children with Fade Away. Fade Away is a rip-off of a Wham song. So there's how I've managed to bring that right round.
I'll tell you something else. So, have you ever seen the George Michael documentary? It's called Freedom. It's absolutely amazing. It's one of the best music documentaries. He was working on it before he died, and so he's part of the contribution. It wasn't just like a posthumous documentary. He was involved in it. And the interview, they go around with a record player and go to famous either singers or film stars or whoever. And they take a record player and play, and they get the record player to play a track of, George Michael or Wham. And Liam Gallagher's in it, and he is a massive George Michael fan. Yep. Like they put on what song is it? These are the days of the open hand. I can't remember the name of the track. Is the George Michael track that he puts on, and Liam Gallagher just sits back and goes boom like that, and he goes, John Lennon could have wrote that. Aye, so
I'm going to have to watch that. I'm going to have to watch. Have you ever noticed the similarities between Fade Away and Freedom?
I'm going to need to listen to them back to back now.
Type it into YouTube, because somebody's done that comparison thing. So fire it into YouTube, JP.
I will do. God, have they done it back to back?
Do that.
they done it back to back, like the two songs back to back?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Aye. So it's a proper rip-off. But I will have a look at that. I definitely will, and I'm sure the social media team at Celtic will be looking for some kind of George Michael.
It's Praying for Time. The song
is that right?
Praying for Time. Yeah, it's an absolutely amazing.
They were neighbours, weren't they? Liam and George Michael, they were neighbours.
Were they?
Wherever they live in London, yeah. Yep.
Oh, Primrose Hill, wasn't it? Is that neck of the woods? Aye. But I just loved it when I saw Liam, speaking so passionately about him, and then especially that song as well, because I saw George Michael live once, 2012. Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And I know our very own Russell Boyce is a big George Michael fan as well.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
We said neighbours in Fife. We say neighbour, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are next door neighbours. But on that note, tune into the Oasis Album Club. And JP has said it live on the show. Hold him to it. He will be part of the panel for Be Here Now. Subscribe to the channel. Everybody keep getting involved. By the way, I haven't even done the draw for last month's prizes. There are 3 prizes up for grabs. The first one is a Bobby Lennox signed and framed print by the one and only Lemon, Bobby Lennox. The second prize is 2 tickets to Bend It Like Bertie in Greenock at the Beacon Arts. And what's the third prize? JP, can you remember? There's a third prize? I can't even remember. Let me have a look. I can't go without saying this. What's the other one? There we go. The October prizes, a signed and framed Bobby Lennox, an Etive watch. There you go. Brand new Etive watch. Beautiful Christmas present either for your loved one or for yourself. So there you go. All you need to do is subscribe. You're in a prize draw. I'll probably do that pre-match, half-time and post-match tonight. That's what we'll do against Ferencvaros when Lawrence Conley comes to the studio to eat my pies and drink my Bovril. It's always a pleasure on a Thursday. That's why we've ran over a wee bit, JP, because it's the only chance I get to chat to you during the week. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved in the comment section. It's an absolute pleasure when you join us on A Celtic State of Mind. We'll be back tonight at 7:30 for the pre-match, and hopefully we will get a result, and hopefully we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us on the ACSOM Bulletin.